What we done started. Look at what we done started. This the people party.
Peace and love, party people, in a place to be. This is the BKMC, the MCEO, the Little Lebowski Urban Achiever, Talib Kweli, and this is the world's best podcast, The People's Party. And as always and as usual, give it up for my lovely and talented, thoughtful and thought-provoking co-host, Jasmin Leigh, in the place to be. What's up, Jasmin? How you feeling?
You know what? I actually am feeling like I wish I was more flexible so I could show my sneakers in the camera.
They look like sneakers.
But they are Vans.
Show them in the camera.
Actually, I'm flexible enough.
She's stretchy.
It's not that type of show.
So yeah, she wanted to show off these shoes because today's guest was actually in the design room when they made these Vans shoes. Now, I'm a friend of today's guest. And so sometimes when you're friends with people that you grew up respecting, you take them for granted. Mm-hmm. And God willing, I've never done this because I cannot overstate what this man and his group mean to me and how I was raised on their music. Like, I wasn't just raised on their music. I really was trying to be like these guys when I grew up. Is an absolute legend. His impact on hip hop culture, from the sound to the style, it cannot ever be overstated. He's a DJ, a producer, a rapper sometimes. Together with Jay Dilla and Q-Tip, he formed a production collective, the UMA, in 1995. He is a founding member of one of the greatest hip-hop collectives of all time, A Tribe Called Quest, probably the most important group in all of hip-hop. You can make a solid argument for that. He is a member of the Grammy-nominated supergroup Lucy Pearl. He's an architect of that sound. You've heard him working with Faith Evans, Yasin Bey, D'Angelo, Raphael Sadiq, Adrian Young, the fantastic Adrian Young, and many, 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 many more. You've heard his voice as the co-host of Microphone Check on NPR, which is one of the premier and motivating inspirations for our show, People's Party. You've heard him as a narrator on Souls of Mischiefs. Our guest, along with Adrian Young, co-produced the soundtrack to Marvel's Luke Cage. Marvel's Luke Cage is the best Marvel production with music.
And I actually saw it.
And you actually watched that one. We was talking about Doctor Strange this morning. He was like, what the hell is all that? Doctor Strange is amazing, but the music ain't fucking with Luke Cage.
No, it ain't.
He is the foundation, the sound provider. He gives a hoot like Woodsy the Owl. Can I get whatever from Mr. Ali Shaheed Muhammad in the place to be?
Yes.
Yeah.
Looking debonair.
Did you see how this man presents himself?
Listen.
That was really beautiful.
Oh, thank you, man. You're a beautiful brother, man. That's a beautiful shirt. Beautiful shirt. And has the initials on it. Look
he
at
walks
that.
in like he has a personal tailor.
The man got his own. When I say the boy got his own clothes, the boy got his own clothes.
What up, y'all?
How you feeling?
I'm feeling good. Happy to be here. Good to see you too.
It's been too long since the last time I saw you.
Yeah, indeed.
How was your pandemic?
Peaceful.
Yeah, I feel that.
Made me appreciate things, as I'm sure a lot of other people.
Absolutely.
Definitely for me, unlike stories I've heard from other people, I was working a lot.
Yeah.
And for musicians and touring musicians specifically, it just completely disrupted your income structure. And so lost a few people. But again, I feel thankful and blessed. And
yeah, everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, everything happens for a reason. And I'm here today, and the Creator's given me this sunrise. So just take it all.
Absolutely. All praise due to the Most High.
Yeah.
You used to live in the apartment that contains Javoti headquarters, and you got me that apartment. You helped get me that apartment.
Yeah, I don't take a lot of credit for stuff. But yeah, man, that building was just a special little building in Clinton Hill.
Yeah.
And my apartment in particular was a 3-bedroom apartment, and it had a nice stretch. And I remember when I was about to leave it, they were like, you sure you don't want to just sublet this before you venture out to Cali? But it was really great. You know, you were there. Bilal was there.
Bilal just left recently.
And
I mean, to put his business out there.
It's a nice size apartment for New York.
It was just like good vibes here.
Yeah, it's a great vibe. I think Robert Glasper was about to move in at one point.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Yeah. When Tribe Called Quest first came out, all us real hip hop fans knew your address, 490 Madison in Bedford-Stuyvesant.
Can I just say, that actually wasn't the real address.
Okay.
Thank God.
Okay.
Yeah, because we all know better than to do things to each other. But it's funny because when we shot the video, even the home that they chose, I was like, you guys, you sure you want to do this? Because it just seems like
people gonna pull up.
Yeah, people gonna pull up. But I did live on Madison Street.
Okay, on Madison.
That was official.
Okay. Yeah. Now, did Tip have a 74 Dodge Dart?
Oh, wow, man. You might want to call him up. Actually, the Dodge Dart belonged to his parents.
Oh, okay.
And we never really took that car. That was a sacred family car.
I used to steal my parents' cars. I did. So when that song came out, I related to that. That El Segundo sounded like I wouldn't, of course, not going to drive to El Segundo, but that sounded like something I would do.
Which is a real place. Yeah. Did you get in trouble?
No, my parents never found out until I started talking about it as an adult.
Wow.
Talib, you were just, I say this with the most respect in the world, but you were not a good example of gentle parenting. You were so bad.
My parents were gentle.
And you just did what you wanted to do.
I'm pretty sure a lot of parents have secrets.
Yeah, I know I do.
But the child does not know that. They think that their parents are just all saintly at all times. And so, but this how you become the best parent when you've done some things, I think.
I agree.
Hear, hear. Now, I've heard you speak about your uncle having a studio that you had access to.
He had a bedroom studio.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. And
he had some pieces.
He had pieces. He had key pieces for what we were doing. And he goes by the name Uncle Mike, and he is my uncle, my mother's a younger brother. And funny enough, the entire industry calls him Uncle Mike. And that's because he's been one of my hugest inspirations. Taught me everything I know about music. He would babysit me sometimes because he's 12 years older than me. And also, when my grandmother had enough of the shenanigans with my uncle and his friends, he would come to my mom's place and set up his equipment. And so that's really where I got to see firsthand DJing, like up close and personal.
Oh, okay.
So everything I really attribute to Uncle Mike. But he had a sampler, he had drum machine, he had a couple of keyboards, and he had that Tascam 4-track. And so on that Tascam 4-track where we, Q-Tip and I, made the first works of A Tribe Called Quest, which still exist.
Wow.
And every now and then, I juggle with, do I ever release this?
Wow.
And I'm like, nah, I don't want to.
So first thing we heard was those promos, Red Alert promos, right?
Yeah. But like Bonita Applebum, the original version was made on the 4-track, which ultimately Q-Tip remixed and changed it before it was released.
When you talk about the sampler, right? It's a Korg sampler, right?
Yeah.
I've heard you speak about the fact that it had sample time of 4 seconds.
Yeah.
And that because of the shorter sample time, it can create a warmer sound.
Yes.
Can you break that down?
So I'm not really an engineer or scientist, but for whatever the technology was at the time, I'm trying to think what can I use as a frame of now to give it an example. Almost like if your television has 720 or 1080. The resolution, if you break it down to a 720, it changes the look of the picture.
Right.
The quality might not look as great, but what is allowed to pass through allows you to get the information you need to get. So liken that to a sampler, the chips that they use gave you a shorter time, which depending on how you use it, you could take your 33 record, put it on 44 RPM, you get more sound, more time out of that sampler, which changes the pitch. It changes frequencies and due to harmonics. And like, I don't want to sound geeky on your show right now.
It's technical stuff, technical talk.
But the harmonics of things, like another example of Motown's recordings, what made it fat was that they understood the harmonic. There's a harmonic middle to every note. And when you play it, you might not necessarily need to boost a frequency. It's just naturally going to have those elements. So if you focus on those elements, you're going to find more pleasurable sound. So with the limitations of time, it creates other opportunities that you can make it great. And so that's what we tried to do.
Wow, that's so interesting to me because just with sampling, and so I was listening to old Gangstar records the other day, and Premier got an interlude where he's like mad. He's like, "Yo, everybody, stop suing me for records." You know the interlude, right? And he's like, "Yo, stop snitching on the records. Tell them what we sample." And when I heard it, it was like a check for me because in this, I'm such a geek for knowing what the samples and where they come from. Like I've had producers on. I'm like, so that beat you made, it was this, right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I go back and watch and like, oh, what am I doing? Like, why am I snitching? Because we was pirate business back then.
Oh yeah, fact.
I mean, and it created such other aspects of life that are great or as great as that moment. I'll give you an example. When Adrian and I, and speaking about Adrian Young, my composing slash production partner, we were working with Joel Donato. And Joel's the original writer of Aquarius, which was Cal Jader did a cover of it, which became the tour guide for Midnight Marauders. Now, I don't remember if we cleared the sample.
It's a tour guide, right?
And so Adrian was like, so when you guys sampled this, and Joel was just looking at me, and I'm looking at Adrian like,
shut up.
That's the phone call you want to get 30 years later
right.
from the record company saying, so you owe us money now.
Right.
But again, just the beauty of sampling, not letting any type of limitation stop creativity and just stop the possibility of what can happen.
So now in the documentary Beats, Rhymes, and Life, the Michael Rapport documentary, you talk about being a kid in Brooklyn and how daunting it was to have to take the train and go to another borough. For people who don't live in New York, that for me was a real experience because I went to high school in Brooklyn, but I used to cut school and take the train and go visit the high schools in Manhattan. And that was a daunting experience.
Yeah, more so because it wasn't just the going to school part. It's what becomes of when you go to school and you meet other students from different boroughs. So then you become friends. It's not like, if you go to your zoned high school. My zoned high school was Boys and Girls High. So you grew up with everyone that went to that school. And when you come home, it's the same community. But venturing out, you're meeting people from Staten Island, Queens, Bronx, Harlem. And so what happens after that, you form these relationships and these bonds where you're hanging out with people. And I don't know if anyone's ever really, at the age of 14, gone out to Staten Island on their own. But that's a venture.
You're talking about getting on a ferry and all that.
Yeah, like the whole thing, and I don't think you should be doing that. Or
but
maybe New York is safer now.
We getting on a train in that era at 8, 9, 10 years old.
Yeah, exactly.
By ourselves.
Exactly. So, I was accustomed to it, but then it's the flip. It's coming home at 11 o'clock, getting off at Gates Avenue, walking down Broadway, super dark, and you're just like, man.
Darker than midnight at Broadway and Myrtle. That's a Yasin Bey lyric.
It's a fear for your life. It's just like, how am I going to get home tonight? Like, what's my pace? You know, which do I cross over at this point? And so that's why I said that. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you met some incredible musicians at that time.
Absolutely.
You break down the hip-hop scene and the artists who were at Murry Bergtraum at that time.
So Murry Bergtraum, we can start with the Jungle Brothers, Mike G in Africa. Also, Brother Jay from the X Clan.
Shout out to Brother Jay.
Who I've known Jason since about 12 years old because my family, his family attended the same church. And so I used to go to Sunday school. That's where I first met Brother Jay.
Okay. Black Watch was heavy in Brooklyn Tech when I was at Tech.
See, that was pretty much the formation. And it was a high school for business careers.
And all these musicians.
But you had these musicians and, children of, original voices of hip hop.
Yeah.
And they made an impression on us. So we were just carrying that torch, that baton, a little bit differently.
Can you tell us about your first meeting with Phife?
The first time I met Phife, Q-Tip at the time had asked me to join the group, and there's a rehearsal space in Manhattan. I think it was like 14th Street. That's where I first met Leak Ice. Was his name at the time, as in Malik Ice, because he was nice with the words. And it was just one of those first time meeting someone and hearing a lot about him, and was just excited to just really be in the room with Tip and Phife and to start this journey of collaborating together.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about his incredible legacy and what, in your opinion, is his place among lyricists.
Ooh.
It's going to be a juicy answer.
Is it? I hope so. Now you raised the bar so
well, you
high.
did the ooh.
Because I do that, and then I often self-edit.
Just let it go.
Because I know once I say something, it's out there. So, but Phife was very... He was a wise guy, like, very smart, and in the likes of very popular comedic teams. Like, I think he could have had a career as a comedian. And he's very in your face. That's on the microphone. Off the microphone, he's not an in your face person. He's very, very nice, very charming, very chill. Still funny though. But I think he came with these punchlines that were tied to mainstream, be it TV shows,
right,
be it movies,
sports, R&B singers.
Phife had a way of just taking the everyday thing that affects us outside of normal life things, things from entertainment specifically, and weave them into some other cockiness and fun. And it's in a memorable kind of a quotable thing that when you repeat it, it evokes an emotion and a feeling. And I think that's a very challenging art for a lot of writers.
Right.
And so from the writing perspective, Phife is pretty dope.
I'm listening to you and I'm looking in my phone because I just now remembered that I have a picture of the day that you and I met. And it was at the building in 1991.
Oh my God. That was like the hangout spot.
Yeah. I got this picture. I can't find it now, but I'm gonna find it and I'm gonna send it to you.
How old were you in
1991? I was 15 years old.
What were you doing there?
I went to the building because we heard that KRS-One was going to be performing because he had this live BDP album coming out. So me and my friends at that age were 15 years old, and the building was the hangout spot. And they'd be like doors at 9. We was there at 9.
And did you get in?
So I was there from 9 to like 11, waiting outside. Here come you and Jerobi. Me and my friends dressed like we was members of Tribe Called Quest.
Wow.
Jerobi saw us trying to get in, and he was like, let these little niggas in. Aww. And we got in. And so I got pictures of you, me, and Jerobi.
Let me see that.
I'm going to send it. I can't find it now.
Okay.
But it's like you had a leather jacket. You was clean. You had a leather jacket, the hoodie with the pointed top, but the hoodie was down low like this. Mm-hmm. And Jerobi had on like a yellow rain jacket, but I just looked crazy. I looked like People's Instinctive Travels.
Okay. That's something Phife would say. You'll have me looking crazy.
Don't mess with Talib's memory. Shit.
I mean, I remember this now because I was Heroes of Mine, but it's like I met Nikki D that night.
Oh, wow.
First Lady on Def Jam. I met Tommy Davidson that night. We had Tommy Davidson. I showed Tommy Davidson, and so I carried a camera around. And so whenever I ran up on you like, yo, you need to take a picture with me. You and Jerobi, Tribe Quest, let's go.
That was a really good time in hip hop.
It was.
In New York City specifically, there was a lot going on. And the building was not too far from Jive. So it was just one of those youthful stomping grounds that, because I forgot about the building.
Right.
But as you mentioned it reminds me of just hanging out with our contemporaries and hearing other people's music drop and feeling excitement when you heard someone, like if Gangstar dropped something,
right?
Or Brand Nubians, and hearing those records and going to the club to watch the DJs do their thing, and these records are being dropped. Prior to that, it was more like dreaming, you know, because you would hear Eric B. and Rakim, or hear a Big Daddy Kane record, or Audio 2.
Right.
And just dream about like one of these days. But then in 91, the day was there for us. So and New York City was still exciting.
Red hot.
Hip hop was still just creative.
When I look at some of the, I used to have the I'm a huge Tribe fan, right? So I used to have this videotape of Tribe Called Quest live on tour in Europe.
Oh, the Art of Moving Butts.
Yeah, and y'all came out with the monk robes.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I was like, yo, these guys is this is different. And like seeing y'all perform, I remember seeing y'all perform at community college on Video Music Box, like the loudness of the crowd and how the people were like, Tribe was just like, it was a phenomenon in the city.
When we did that tour and that you're speaking about, that was Tribe opening up for the Jungle Brothers and Boogie Down Productions. It was our first time in Europe, and I think it was in France, in Paris. It wasn't that warm of a reception. Actually, I made those robes that we marched on, but that really just came from.
Well, I know. So the Europe thing, it wasn't that warm, but the things in New York.
The things in New York definitely had a different.
In Harlem, there was one in Harlem. I remember an old show.
There was definitely. I mean, the pulse was there, you know, and it felt good to make it in New York, where we come from, and to you know, be children of this culture, and to have our opportunity to be a part of it, you know, to leave something behind, especially when we started off, there wasn't such a warm reception for us, even in New York City, because we were different. You know, you look at our clothing, the musical choices was very melodic, very different than the things that had come before it. So, like when you come with something new, often, you know, it doesn't impact people right away, but at that point in time, things were really just exciting. It felt really good.
Now, shout out to the prop master, Red Alert.
Oh, yeah.
He was Mike G from the Jungle Brothers' cousin?
Uncle.
Uncle, right? Take us through the forming of the native tongue. Shout out to Jungle Brothers, Chiali, Black Sheep, De La Soul, of course, Beat Nuts, Money Love, Leaders New School, Queen Latifah. Did I miss somebody? I don't know. I'm sure. But talk us through like the whole connection between what was happening Red Alert and what was happening in native tongues and how that became a clique.
Cool DJ Red Alert is Mike G's uncle. And we went to the same high school. We being Q-Tip and I went to the same high school as Africa, Mike G. And we were all making music at the same time. And they released their Straight Out of the Jungle album in 88. And we kind of were just always, because we were friends, we were always hanging out together. And naturally, they looked at us, they being Jungle, as we're on and you guys are going to be on next, sort of a thing. And so at the time, hip hop was only played on 2 stations in New York City, and it was only on the weekend. You had Mr. Magic, Marley Marl on BLS, and you had Red Alert on KISS. In terms of like the big stations, there were some college radio stations that definitely represented, but that was prime time. And so when your uncle is like king of the airwaves at the time, it's an incredible, oh my God, I wonder if he would ever take an interest in us, sort of a thing. And there was never a push. Red is the same person he was then, just supportive. You cannot get Red to play a record that he doesn't believe in. And him playing all the hottest clubs in New York City at the time, there was just such an energy around, and we were there as the kids during that time, but we were the kids who were doing something. We were making something. And he didn't have a hands-on approach. It was just like, I see you kids. I see y'all. When it's time, it's time. And I think it was before the Straight Out the Jungle album came out. I think at the time Jungle might have had like a couple of singles out. There was a show in Roy Wilkins Park, which is in Queens, New York, not too far from Q-Tip's house. And the Jungle Brothers had a show there. De La Soul had a show there. We were there just hanging out with Jungle. And that's when we first met De La Soul. And instantly, just from day one, it was like meeting some cousins, you know, and it was just like, oh, these cousins, I like these cousins. Right. And so that really was the formation of the Native Tongues, just from the three groups hanging out constantly. We were in each other's studio sessions, supporting, just sleeping, just living the life. Still students, because we were going to school, we were working, but speaking with people who musically understood where you were going. It just was a special time, a special moment. And then with Queen Latifah being on the same label as De La Soul, there became, meeting her became like an extension. Moni Love, at the time that Jungle was touring in Europe, and that's how they met Moni. So then that's how we met Moni. And then it just kept cascading to leaders of the new school, Black Sheep, Chi Ali, and the Beat Nuts. It's just like the whole Native Tongues nucleus was expanding. Yeah. And when, you know, we heard music of all these other groups, again, like I was saying before, it was just a charging sort of inspiration, because we would do something that would make them go crazy and vice versa. So it just became a unit without intent for it to become this unit like that. Yeah. It was very organic.
And it felt like that for the fans, too. It made me feel seen and heard as a hip-hop fan. Because I'm like, here's a space I can exist in. Yeah.
What was it like working with Chris Lighty, rest in peace, and Violator Management?
Wow. It wasn't so much as work than it was just family.
Yes.
And so just to go back, Chris was the Jungle Brothers road manager. And Chris understood momentum, and the Jungle Brothers had momentum, you know, especially with the song like Girl, I'll House You. Like that was, it changed a lot of what was going on at the time. And so Chris had those guys performing like, they would have a show maybe in New Jersey and then Delaware and then DC all on the same night. Oof. And so Chris got everybody there safely and made everyone understand what it meant to be professional. And so this was before Tribe was putting out records, and just being there, carrying records, just being, you know, just watching as often you do as an artist. And at some point, Chris just looked at me and was like, he would call me to go places that didn't really have anything to do with the music, more exposing me to his family structure. So I got to really, like, Chris became like a brother. And I saw his work ethic tied to his family ethic, tied to his desire to see the art form and the culture grow from beyond his window view. Chris grew up in the Bronx, so he grew up watching the birth
of hip-hop.
Hip-hop, the short-lived successes of certain, you know, hometown heroes, and seeing the opportunity of what could be greater than just what was happening beyond the Bronx, beyond New York City. And he became the ultimate artist advocate because he watched this whole thing. So it was really personal for Chris to see the culture grow and to see artists be taken care of for their creativity and intellectual properties, just the whole gamut of it. And Chris would be that first person to arrive at the office, last person to leave type of person. So when you ask me a question about Chris, it's like I could be here all day speaking about him, but he was a very special person, obviously for the business side, but to me personally.
What would you say? Would you say that how he cared about his artists was the legacy he left, or what would you feel his legacy that he left in the industry was?
Absolutely. Not only how he cared about his artists, because it wasn't just that. It was to give you the information to empower yourself and to
teach you to fish.
For you to not only teach you to fish, but question your actions, your reason, your purpose. And if you're going to sign up for something, what are you signing up for? Do you really want this? He would make you think about things that you weren't necessarily thinking about, just dreaming like, oh, I'm going to make this record and do this. You know, Chris would be like, okay, so you did that, but then what else? You know, and you need people to ask you the what else beyond the goals that you have already laid out, especially if you can't see that far. You know, and Chris, he could see way further than a lot of people. And so you need that inspiration, because it's like this. We're not giving the infrastructures or the institutions for success in America. We're just not. And if you are, it allows, you know, generational wealth. It allows for there to be more of a united movement to establish law, to help society be more supportive of creating additional opportunities. And if you grow up in a space that doesn't have that, then you don't even know what you're playing in, but you're a piece in this. And so Chris, in his way, allowed you to really see it bigger than that. And so for me, his legacy, for those who really were able to understand what it was his methods were, they saw that. And, you know, and you can talk to 50, talk to LL Cool J, you know, speaking with me, Tip, Buster, you see.
All people that are still thriving in the industry.
Yes.
Right. Rest in peace to Chris. I don't know if you can see this, or maybe I should do this camera.
I think they should just insert it.
We're going to insert it?
Just insert it and post.
I'm going to show Alito.
How do you keep all these photos? You always have an old photo on your phone.
That's still me when I go to bed.
When you
look at Jerobi, man. Look at you.
Look at me.
Wow.
Y'all still at least look the same. I look like a whole different person.
Can you pass it around?
You look like you.
I was trying to be in people's
you were in it.
travels.
You were in it.
Yeah, I had a bandana, I had an earring.
But what's incredible about that, Kweli, is that Tribe, we went on to do what we went on to do, but then, you know, like, look where you are, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I stand on the shoulders of not just my ancestors, but the people who are still here. Yeah. And it's with Tribe, De La, Jungle Brothers. I was particularly into the native tongues, but I was into all hip hop. My entire wall was covered with Rap Masters, Word Up, Right On, fanzine pics of all of y'all. And now everybody who was on my wall is in my phone.
That's amazing.
You know what I'm saying? It's like really manifested that.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I had to get there. Let's talk about how Low End Theory changed for a lot of people what hip hop means it could be, and particularly with, you know, the making of it, working with Bob Power, having that Neve board for that sound. Let's get into that.
Wow. Going in to make that album was more, well, I can look back at it now, and it was certainly a manifestation of the things that I was just talking about a moment ago about Chris. Understanding what can actually happen if you just give a little bit more to the vision. And there'd come a time where Tribe wasn't going out and hanging out as often with De La Soul and the Jungle Brothers. And it seemed, I think, for many people that we felt we were too good for the norm of the fam. And that was never the case. It was, we saw that we could really take this opportunity that went from, okay, you guys made your little record, right? Because sometimes people talk to you like that.
Right.
Family members,
Right.
aunties, whatever. I'm not associating that to any particular.
Right.
It just happens that way. And we saw it as there's so much more that will come. We just have to do our part. Mm-hmm. And so when we look at groups like Earth, Wind and Fire, the Beatles, Parliament, Funkadelic, you start to understand, there's more things that you can achieve, and you want to achieve those things looking at groups like that, like the greatest icons. And so with the Low End Theory, we just wanted to make people's instinctive travels in the passive rhythm like it was a nice introduction, but we're here to stay sort of an album. And so with that, we had a bigger budget, a little bit, not too much bigger. The record company had a recording studio, Battery Studios. We went from Calliope, where it was more of an economic style-based environment, to something that was, it's really nice in here. And wow, you got, that Neve board like you spoke about, the electronics on the Neve. Again, not to geek out to everyone who's watching, but the engineering on that board adds something to the frequencies, and still to this day, it is a very key piece for a lot of people's recording process. And Bob Power, we met him midway of recording the first album. But he is definitely another instrumental piece to the success of everything tied to Tribe sonically. He's always willing to try things. I think that we always wanted more bass.
There's whole skits about this.
Yeah, like we just always wanted it to just be bigger, make it bigger, bigger, bigger. And we might not have the language to speak to an engineer of what we meant by that. But Bob, where unlike some engineers where they think they know what you're talking about and they think this is what you meant by it, or they try to belittle you a little bit because you don't know the language.
And hip-hop was challenging to engineers and musicians, right? Because they're schooled in a certain way.
Yeah.
And you're asking them to go against that.
Exactly. If the laws of physics is meant to be challenged, you just have to ask the right question. You know, like sometimes if you have a Alexa at home, you ask Alexa something, she gives you an answer. I'm like, you're not asking Alexa the right question. So with physics, you have to ask the right question. And some engineers think they know the answers, and it's like, you don't, just like we don't. But Bob was never that person. He understood, I think I know what you guys are talking about, but let me try this to see. Whereas other engineers made us feel like we're in service to them. And Bob wasn't that. So just his studio presence alone, let alone his sharp ears and his, there were things that he was just trying. Not because he had tried it before, but he understood enough of his equipment to push the equipment to do what it was he thought we were asking. And I mean, there have been so many times where after the fact, like deep into Beats, Rhymes, and Life, and I'm standing on a stage somewhere, I call Bob and be like, Bob, yo, the mixes, man, from Low End Theory, which was, several years prior, I'm like, you don't understand how it's rocking the stadium right now. Like, thank you.
Right.
Just didn't have to. We've all, we're there together, but he was really important. And Q-Tip's vision, I have to speak to that, is really the push for the whole thing, Tip is always challenging everybody to be greater.
Yes, indeed.
He's very competitive. Where he and I are alike is we don't like the conventional. We don't like the predictable. We like the mystique of music, but in life. And we strive to just dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
And so with Tip, he definitely wanted to dig way deeper to put forth this message that, it's about the bass, but it's about, so the low end theory, and we talked about this in the press in the past, so people might be familiar with the definition of the low end theory. It's obviously about the low frequency and the triple entendre.
Certain low frequency stuff.
Certain lows. But the other is the fact that, people of color were on the lower end of the totem pole of America. And disgraceful as it is for a country that has come so far, and for us specifically, our parents are the civil rights movement.
Yes, indeed.
And to see their sacrifices and what they've done to attain a balance of equality, and to know that we're still going through it. It really upset us, and we're students of Public Enemy, students of BDP. And so for us musically, we wanted to make sure that we put that message into the music the best way that we could.
Yeah. It was interesting to me that you said that, me as a fan, there was I could tell the native tongues weren't hanging out as much. De La in particular, Paz would rap about these things. He would be like, yo, we're not hanging out as much. And then the Stakes Aside come out, we're back hanging out again. Paz kept us updated. Shout out to Merce. But
shout out to Merce.
Definitely. But was this part of the reason for when Midnight Marauders came, which is a seminal hip-hop classic, not just hip-hop classic, but just in the world of music, one of the best albums ever created. It's so inspirational, influential on so many levels. But it was the sort of feeling like y'all were moving away from hanging out as much part of the reasoning behind putting people's faces on the album cover?
No, actually, it was more to show the unity of all of us. It's in under the culture of hip hop. Us being Zulus, the lessons are always about unity. That's one of the foundations of the Zulu nation. Peace, love, unity, having fun. And so when you hear groups like NWA or the Ghetto Boys, there has been, I think, in the past, a thinking that you're not going to understand. You're not going to associate. You're not going to, it's just not you're not from that state. You're not from that town. So there will be distance. And that's just the key tool of the enemy, is to divide us.
Yes, indeed.
And so for that, it was, can we get as many artists and people tied to the culture that wants to show up to the photo shoot, please, to be a part of that. That was our love, our expression of love for who we are, and love for our peers, and love for the music. Even if you're from the Bay Area, you mess with Tribe.
Right.
Right. Even if you're from Houston, you mess with Tribe. Tribe mess with we mess with people from Chicago, all over the world. So that's really what the symbolism behind that.
That was dope.
And Midnight Marauders.
It was dope.
I know you talked about tour guide earlier, but whose idea was that? And also, can you tell me the origin of I Love How She Talks?
Oh, man. So the tour guide is she rest in peace. She's no longer here. Her name's Laurel Dan, and she worked at the record company. She worked at Jive, and she just had such this perky personality and look. And Tip was just like, yo, it'd be great if we could get Laurel to be this voice of this thing, this idea I have of just putting some quotes together and piecing it together. And so that was his idea. And it was a nightmare for Bob Power, actually, because the technology at the time wasn't created to do that thing. And so Bob, I remember his face when he came to the studio, when he finished everything and showed it to us. He was like, "You guys." And it was because he took every syllable, and every word's similar to how they designed Voice of Siri.
I was thinking that when I was listening. I was like, this sounds like Siri.
Yeah. And so he chopped up everything because we wanted it to be robotic. And again, the technology did not exist for that. So he went home, took his computer, took the tapes, and just separated everything. And when we heard it, it was just like, yep, that's it's going to have an impact. And there wasn't anything that sounded like that. So, and I really wish, so many years later, that I could give Laurel a hug, because
rest in peace, Laurel.
Because she was such a good sport about it, and that little piece has inspired people. I remember TLC had dropped the album not too long after, and they kind of had their same sort of digital voice. And there have been other people who've done the same thing.
I feel like in the movie, I'm about to get on my Marvel nerd here, but the movie Thor Ragnarok.
I didn't mean to roll my eyes, Marvel lover. Sorry.
Thor Ragnarok, right? When he gets beat up by the sister and he loses his eye.
You're looking at me and I know nothing of what you're talking about.
He meets Jeff Goldblum, and he's going to Jeff Goldblum's planet as a tour guide. As a tour guide voice with the music playing. And it always makes me think of the Tribe thing.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah. I don't know if they got it from there.
I don't know either, but
they did have the Three's a Magic Number at the end of the Spider-Man, which was a good little hip-hop gem for us.
I just want to say that you're so composed that it's so cool to watch, and you're like, get excited about something, because I can really feel the excitement.
Now
he's so composed that his excitement is palpable. I feel it in the room.
Oh my gosh, you guys are hilarious.
Tell me more.
I'm going to be self-conscious.
No, you're good.
No. But you're great.
Now listen, Phife is like constantly stepping it up. By the time we get to Midnight Marauders, he's letting us in more. And he's calling himself the funky diabetic. And he's like, Ali Shaheed Muhammad got me doing calisthenics. And you always seem very healthy. Like, you were wearing, like, clothes that fit you when everybody's wearing baggy clothes?
Yes.
Yeah, like, you had a very, like, your style was like, man, I wish I could dress like this guy. Because, like, everybody else was so hip-hop. But you had a very, even now with your style, but even with being, like, health conscious, and Phife also rapped later on about Shaheed and Tip had me stop smoking ism. He talked a little bit about Fife's health issues and how it had an impact on the group at that time.
Oh, wow. You see, I'm still affected by the loss of my brother. And I can never cover that.
Yes,
he was.
I would never want you to.
I still miss him.
Yes.
And what's crazy is that Q-Tip introduced me to him, and Tip is like the brother. Forget the cousins you didn't know until later on. Like, Tip to me is certainly like, you sure we don't have the same daddy somewhere, So what's crazy about, and why I'm so impacted, obviously not just because of the loss, but Fife's friendship to me. There are times where Phife would call me way more than he talked to Tip, and the two of them, to me, are like the same way I feel about Tip being that brother. Those two are that, so for me, I'm the other brother on the outside watching the challenges of their relationship, and Phife would call me often about everything. So that's what I feel when you ask the question. But
yes, indeed, I appreciate you sharing it.
Yeah, And again, the question in particular adds to the emotion because he ultimately transitioned because of the diabetes, you know, and the impact was felt from inception to him no longer being here and still now. But again, the way that Phife dealt with it, as I said, he has a comedic persona, you know, and so for him, it was his way of boxing that thing called diabetes. It's like, you got me. I'm not sure how to overcome you, but I'm going to make you a part of my life in a different way. And he did it, I think, in a way that other diabetics would not feel alone.
Yeah.
And the way it affected the group, well, one, just watching your brother have this health challenge, but for Tip and I, we have two different styles of just living and breathing. And Tip loved him so hard, he really wanted him to stop doing certain things. And I think said it in a way that felt maybe a little more harder. My persona is a little more delicate. And so Tip and I were saying the same things to him. And it was really more of, you understand what sugar does to you. So how about we combat it by doing some push-ups on the tour bus in the middle of the road? Like, let's do some dips. And Phife would be like, man, you guys leave me alone. And it's like, nah, I mean, this is not fun. I hate working out. But maybe they'll balance out some things a little bit. So that was our way of trying to help as best we could. It affected the group, and like I said, watching your brother have this bout and this battle to the point that at times there may have been limitations of things he was capable of, just from the physics of it, but not from the mental. He was very mentally strong, all the way to the end, you know. Obviously with the output that he given to the last album.
Oh yeah, phenomenal output.
Yeah.
Beautiful piece of work.
And I'll just go on to say, with his posthumous album, you know. He had been working on that for a little while, but he really got more focused in while he was working on the Tribe album to complete his the last album that had come out, Fight Forever.
And thank you for letting me be on that album with y'all. It was like a highlight of my career. Tribe Called Quest has always had a spiritual core without being overtly preachy. Phife says, I grew up as a Christian, so to Jah I give thanks. But on the last album, he starts exploring different ideas.
Yeah, I think just being around, I'll say Kamal this time, being around Kamal and I, and obviously, I mean, he grew up in a very religious household.
A Jehovah's Witness.
Witness.
Shout out to Cheryl Boyce Taylor, too. I met her before I met Phife.
I heard, you told me this.
As an author,
Yeah, and so, you know, between his mom and his grandmother, Phife's grandmother was, man, she meant the world to him, you know? And so she also was that reminder of the Creator, you know? While you out there being a young boy doing what you do, don't forget this aspect. And so those sometimes the things you hear when you're younger, you don't appreciate till you get older. And I think with his, we all of us are dealing with our mortality every day we wake up. But for others, it's more like on the forefront of your mind. And so with that and his relationship with his wife, he probably was wondering some other things because And I know this, I could say this because I was born a Muslim and Christian. You know, my father was Muslim, my mother was Christian. I went to Bible camps, I went to the madrasas. You know, I read from both sides of things. And I saw how one really cultivates your spiritual being.
Right.
That serves you a little bit more. And I think Malik at some point really saw that. Like, it became eye-opening. Like, I've been doing this way. Something's different over here. I'm not quite sure what it is. And so I wish he were here to really
flesh that out.
Flush it out.
Yeah. As for you, you were, for me, and you might know more history about this than I would, because as a practicing Muslim who was, it was known, right? It was like, for the first time, hip hop obviously had been influenced by Islam, particularly on the 5% side. But there wasn't a lot of people who were not 5%ers who were identifying as Muslim when Tropical Quest first came out. Has this ever been a difficult or conflict for you to be a rock star and a Muslim?
You know, that's a really good question. Yes, I'll say maybe not difficult, but it's just challenging to be a human being.
Okay, yeah.
You know, to try and navigate all that is laid before you each and every day, then to look back to the day of yesterday to figure out how it tied to not only the day you're having, but the future. Like, that's just is very tricky. It's very challenging. And then throw in the personality of someone who's really super quiet and closed off, because I am.
Right.
And I don't like attention. When I stand on stage, I say a prayer, like, I'm like, God, forgive me for this. You know, just because Muslims believe there is no God but Allah. You know, La ilaha illallah. You become Muslim by saying that. Allah means God. I don't want to be seen as a God-like thing because I'm standing on a stage saying, say ho.
Right.
Say whatever's coming out my mouth. Because I don't want to be called before what I believe is my creator to say, okay, when you were in this position and you had this opportunity, your likeness was like something you should not have it be like. So you factor all of that. I'm quiet. I don't really want to be on, like, you know, and I have a belief system that makes me accountable for things I say and do. Forget the aspect of music in Islam, because that's another heavy aspect. And for those out there who do not know, like, music is not allowed. You know, there are certain aspects of music that was allowable, like the poetry side of it. You know, I think beating of a drum, but blowing on a wind instrument is not allowed. Playing a string instrument is not allowed. Again, for me, it is, you make the music, what is the music making the people do? Again, I don't, like, you're asking me a question that has depths and layers. So for anyone out there is watching this part of it, like, just go with me, or...
Are we right here?
The shaitan, which is, we know as the devil, will be asked certain things of the creator at some point in time. The response may be, I didn't make them do this, but weren't you there whispering? I told you could whisper, but I told you what would happen if you did. You should leave them alone. You didn't want to leave them alone. You didn't pull the trigger, but you were right there. So when it comes to the music, am I creating from the sense of not entertainment, but really what's in my heart to just be giving, joyful, passing information on? Am I doing something in that's still creating this rhythm and this frequency that then goes against the belief that which is gives us air, gives us shelter, water? I won't say it's difficult. I'll say it's challenging knowing when you know. If you don't know anything,
Right. It's no challenge.
It's not. It's no challenges. You're acting and living in what. But when you know things,
It's that burden of knowledge.
Yeah, the burden of
Ignorance
knowledge.
is bliss.
Yes,
Ignorance is absolutely bliss.
and not only do you have the information, but you have age on your, as
Right. So you have wisdom and experience.
wisdom and experience that's now testifying against you. Your own wisdom, your own age is now testifying, because it's not, the age is not going to go against the creator. The age is going to go against you.
Right.
Your own age. Like, that's the stuff I walk with in my head every day. And I just want to get it right.
It's a hard trick to land.
It's a hard trick to land because, like I said, just being a human being.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Like, forget the beliefs and all, like, just like standing and breathing
Right. Right.
is challenging. And then you're doing that with how many? 300 billion other souls?
It's a lot to do with one person standing next to you.
It's a lot to do with just one person, you yourself, let alone a couple of, if you have siblings and y'all all in a room, one room house together. Like, there's so much that comes to it. So I don't try to be preachy in the music. I did make an album where it was called Shaheed Along Stereotypes, where me at times sounded like I was, but I don't like to be preachy. My father.
I heard that album. I don't think you was tearing up the club with Stokely.
Yeah, but it was, and even that, that's so funny.
I like that song. That's what
It was just
my
very
jam.
smooth how you put that
It
in
was, but I made that again with being a garden seeker, and that was what I call my production company, and was one who's trying to get to the gardens of heaven. Like,
Yes.
everything I do really is just for that, and I know I fuck it up every day.
It's an attempt, right? That's what we're out here doing.
It is an attempt, and the belief is that the Creator has a mountain pile of forgiveness for a mountain pile of sins. But nonetheless, when you're a little younger, you can get away with certain things.
And there goes that age and experience.
Yeah,
That, as the 5%ers would say, that knowledge and wisdom and understanding.
exactly.
Yeah.
So how did you meet Raphael Saadiq, and what was it like working with Tony Tone?
Oh, we received a phone call. This was, I think, 1991. And Raphael had reached out because he wanted, one, he was a huge fan of hip hop in general, specifically East Coast hip hop. And he'll tell his Bay Area homies, rappers, that he loves East Coast.
Right.
He just liked our sound and wanted Tribe to do a remix for Tony. And I think the song was called All the Way. So he reached out, and I'm not sure. I don't think we had at that point worked on anything outside of hip hop. And he'd come to New York, and it was just kind of like, don't really know what
You want me to do?
we're gonna do, because for us, Tony was like our generation, Earth, Wind, and Fire.
That's right.
So it was just like, what do you do when Earth, Wind, and Fire comes saying, hey, we want you to do something? I mean, yeah, duh, you do what you're supposed to do, but it was just it was an enormous idea. And I worked on something, and the group used it. But outside of that, Raphael became like a big brother to me. And so every time he traveled to New York City, be it with Tony, or on his own, he'd call and reach out, just, yo, what's up? I'm in town, let's hang out. And we would hang out and always work on some music. And at some point, when they were working on, I think it was his third album, Sons of Soul album, Raphael was like, yo, I need you to come do something for the group. They were recording in Trinidad at the time. They apparently upset the Trinidadian government a little bit.
Oh, damn.
Because when I got there, they confiscated all my equipment.
Wow.
And so I just think that just had to do more with paying whomever at the border. Just
right,
that happens.
Extortion.
It's official government tax. So it was one of those things. But I'm actually happy that happened. At the time, I wasn't happy. I was like, they're taking my stuff,
right,
like my discs,
right,
like my entire musical life at that point in time was in those bags. And it was kind of devastating, but it was a really good thing that happened. And I'll tell you why. The days I was there, I was pretty much helpless in terms of being able to perform my job. And that's because I didn't have my stuff.
Oh, wow.
And I had prepared some samples and things like that for them. Maybe 6 hours before it was time for me to leave, suddenly my gear showed up.
Yes.
And so it was just like, okay, let me get to work real fast. And I programmed a beat. This studio had I think there were 4 studios, and it was in a facility that had housing, gym, some club. Like it was whoever spent money trying to court artists to come record at this facility. I'd never seen anything like it before. In one of the rooms, we all piled up into a room. I had just programmed a beat, and Raphael had the bass around his neck, and then he had a microphone standing there just like that in front of the board. Raphael just said, without saying a word to anyone else, he just said, yo, follow me. Press play. He started playing his bass line and started freestyling. Can't keep it to myself. And I just sat there and watched, and I'm looking at all these guys, like without saying a word of, I'm going to play in the key of whatever, C. And it'll be, I'm going to go from C to G to, like, he didn't do any of that. It was just, yo, guys, follow me. And he started singing. I'm watching, and it changed my life. Because up until that point, the only way I could make music is by sampling someone else's music.
And now you can do it.
And I always wanted to not do that.
Right.
And so I left Trinidad, came straight home, and actually called Bob Power and told Bob I wanted to buy a bass, and he met me at Manny's Music. I bought my first bass guitar.
Wow.
Bob showed me how to hold the guitar because I didn't know how to hold the guitar.
Right.
Told Raphael, I'm going to play this bass, And so on one of Raphael's trips to New York, he's like, okay, man, I want to play something for you. I'm thinking it's like some new Tony music. And he goes, so there's Stevie, there's Marvin, there's Michael, and I'm waiting on the edge like you guys are waiting for me to finish. And there's D'Angelo. I'm like, all right. And then he plays me some of D'Angelo's demo. And I'm just like the rest of the world. For the first time anyone's ever heard D'Angelo, I'm like, what? Who is this? Like, what is this? And he played me Lady, a song that he had written and produced for D'Angelo. And he was like, yeah, he wants to work with you. I'm like, okay. Like, again, that moment of when Raphael called, go back some years, I'm like, what am I going to do? Like, what am I going to do with this guy? He's incredible. And so that's how Brown Sugar came, just from that. But Raphael's a big brother, like up until just this December, I had, my studio was in his building.
That's where I did your show at,
That's where you did Microphone Check. And I mean, he's big brother. He's very influential. He has been through a lot in the music business. He has a lot of knowledge on navigating things because he's been through some things in the industry. And he's just always, I think we all need like a mentor in this industry who's had some experience.
Yeah.
So he's definitely that big brother to me.
And he's still
That's awesome, because that's what Talib does. He's like a mentor for me, too. He calls up and...
I didn't hear what she said.
I'm giving you a shout out.
Oh, no, I appreciate it.
He doesn't
I'm like,
need it.
Jeff Ross? What's going on?
No, I mean,
I
Jeff,
appreciate it, and we love Jeff,
can I
too.
just give a compliment? God dang it.
No, thank you, Jasmine. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Lucy Pearl, I enjoyed that album, and I got to be on there. Cypher Sounds, it's funny because Jared plays bass, which I saw him lighting up when you were talking about your bass story. But Jared started Ruckus Records, and he hired Cypher Sounds as the A&R. Cypher Sounds, he was his big plan to get us on the radio was to have us rap on things that were cracking, and Don't Mess With My Man was moving. And it's funny because he was like, I'm gonna get you on the Don't Mess With My Man remix. And I did it and it came out. But what I didn't realize was, I think there was like a promotion where they were trying to get a bunch of rappers on it. And so when I go to look up the Don't Mess With My Man remix, it's like my version and like someone else's version. There's so many versions.
I only know about your version. I actually still
that's
have.
because mine is the best.
Exactly. You know what I'm saying? And I have a few 12 inches in storage with your version on it.
It was only 12 inch.
Yeah, it was only 12 inch. That was a fun project to work on. So the idea of Lucy Pearl was birthed out of the relationship that had grew from Raphael introducing me to D'Angelo, and then anytime I would see the two of them together, we would just make music. Sometimes we would fly to Sacramento at the time where Raphael lived and just make some ill stuff. And at some point, we all thought we should form a group. And at the time that we decided to do that was when D was working on Voodoo. So naturally, he could not step away from the making of that album. Could you imagine if he stopped working on that album?
Right.
And so the idea continued to grow. And Raphael called me again with one of his suspenseful calls and says, all right, I got it. Ali Shaheed Muhammad, formerly of A Tribe Called Quest. Raphael Sadiq, formerly of Tony. And I'm holding on, waiting for it. And he said, Dawn Robertson, formerly of En Vogue. I lost my mind. I was like screaming. I was like, oh my God, are y'all
Right.
for real? He was like, yeah.
Phife used to have a crush on her.
Exactly. I called Phife after that too.
Right.
But, and so I flew out right after that phone call to meet with Dawn and Raphael to just talk about the prospects of what if just a what if. And that day we wrote the song Good Love.
It's a good song.
And they actually was like, yo, could you give us a couple of words? I was like, what? I'm used to being in a room with wordsmiths, you know? And so not only was it a music contribution, but I helped write lyrics. And just being in that environment was different. And by the end of the night, when we had that song, and we just all looked at each other and just laughed, was like, yeah, this is not going to stop. And I didn't go home for a few weeks. We recorded a good portion of it. But it was especially because at that time, Tribe had pretty much retired. And so it was a good time for a new beginning.
Yeah.
You know.
All right. So, how did you meet Adrian Young, and what is it like working together?
I met Adrian Young actually through the good old platform of Twitter.
Ooh,
wow.
Talib's favorite platform, actually.
They love me there.
So I heard, bro. And actually, an artist named Chauncey Sherrod, a.k.a. His name was Rocky, singer. And he, at the time, was just having conversations about people that he'd love to work with. And he was like, man, have you heard of this guy named Adrian Young? I would really love to work with him. And at the time, Microphone Check was still on NPR. And the people at the NPR offices in New York City just kept mentioning his name all week. Like I was being hit with Adrian Young. And so we reached out on Twitter, and he was like, man, I'm a fan. We should link up sometime. And he said, I happen to be in Brooklyn. And he was staying right down the street, the hotel up the street from where we lived.
Yeah.
I don't think many people at that time. I knew about the hotel.
Are you talking about the Condor Hotel?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a little gem. That's a little cheat code.
It's a little, exactly.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't really know about that
and
hotel.
It's the block is super Hasidic.
Exactly.
It's crazy because it's like, and you went in, and there's a studio next door too.
I didn't know that.
Vice and Virtue is a good studio.
Okay.
Yeah.
Adrian was staying right 3 blocks?
Yeah, it's about 4 or 5 blocks away.
4 or 5 blocks away. And so we linked up, had lunch, and just introduced ourselves. and he told me about this Souls of Mischief album that he was working on, and asked if I would come on and be a host, like similar to the DJ in the Warriors movie.
Right, Lynn Thigpen.
What's the name?
Lynn Thigpen. She was also the voice on Carmen Sandiego.
Where in the world
Yeah.
is?
So it was just to pretty much be a tour guide to the caper that was happening on this record, and sort of like letting the fans or the people who are listening, but more it's just, you know, articulating what was going on. So that was what he asked me to do when I got to LA, to just record my part. And he was like, and you think you could do the music that you're supposed to speak on? And I was like, what?
Right.
Just thought I came here to record like the script. He put me on the spot. And fortunately, had spent time learning how to play instruments beyond drum machines and being caught out there without equipment. So I went to the drums, I played something on piano, and then he played something on bass, and it went by so fast. And we both at the end was like, wow, that was cool. You know, often you don't really have that kind of experience in the studio. Sometimes you just go on just to see what it will become. And then sometimes it becomes what you thought it would be. But sometimes you have that chemistry, you know?
Sounds like a love at first sight.
Yeah, you have that chemistry, and it's just like, wow, this is really cool. All right, maybe it was just lightning striking one time. And then he wanted me to fix something. And so I flew out to LA again and just wound up making another couple of songs. It was like, wow, this is really cool, you know, especially for someone who has, I guess, the musical limitations that I had at that point in time, or previously, by only relying on digging in the crates and sampling. Adrian had that same start. He was a DJ, had an MPC, was sampling music, but this guy plays bass, guitar, piano, drums, flutes.
Oh, flutes.
All the saxophones. So going from sopranito to soprano to alto to tenor to baritone, like that's who he is. And he taught himself that from not having musicians around when you want to sample something and turn it into something more. And it's exact same thing for me. Just being in a room with someone who kind of like, you grew up on the same records, you grew up sampling the same records, hoping that, well, in producing this little 4-bar, 8-bar section, you wish you could do more with it, to actually now knowing how to do more with it because you taught yourself how to play an instrument. So he and I had the exact same musical journey. So we understand each other. He would do something that I would never do. I'd do something that he would never do, but we think the same way. And so it's that's pretty much how the production partnership began. And when I moved to LA, was having a hard time trying to figure out what I was doing. Only from the sense that I didn't make a lot of friends in the music industry doing certain things because you're asked to do things, and for me, it compromised my soul and spirit. I thought I would leave music. And right when I just had that, okay, well, I don't know what I'm going to do in terms of being able to secure myself and my family, but this might be the time to just leave music. And right when I had that thought, Cheo Hadari Coker,
shout out to Cheo,
hit me and said, I'm thinking about hiring you to score something. And he hit Adrian at the same time. He didn't know that Adrian and I were working together.
That's interesting.
Oh, wow, that's destiny.
And so it was just like,
all of that is divine.
Yeah,
like you think about leaving music and then this happens?
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm working with the same person that he also wants to bring in. And it's because, we both understand the information of where the great hip hop records were made. The source material is golden.
Yeah, Adrian the first time I heard of him was Black Dynamite soundtrack.
Yeah.
And, I was listening to Kendrick's new album, and I was telling a friend of mine, Tori Russell, who's upstairs, that Kendrick, his sensibilities sound like his mom's was listening to 90s R&B. Because like that's his well. Or he's jumping into like OJ's or something like that, right? But for us, it's like blaxploitation and some soundtracks and certain like things from television that inform us. And so when I heard, Black Dynamite, just to me, I found out later he even edited the movie. But to me, it was such a cultural phenomenon. It was the best movie I'd seen that year. I couldn't help but tell everyone I ran into, have you seen Black Dynamite? No, but now watch the scenes. Okay, now we watched it. Now let's go back and listen to what's happening with the music. Okay, now we've listened to the music. Now listen to the lyrics. Now listen to how they narrate in the movie, like what he did with that soundtrack. I'm like, how it was, when I found out that he was a younger person,
exactly.
I'm like, they had to have gotten somebody from that era to do this. And so it's like when and same thing for the Luke Cage thing is like y'all work with Miguel Atwood Ferguson and brought in strings and brought in the orchestra, stuff like that. And I've heard you talk about how a lot of the records we reference, they didn't go in the studio without a string section, without orchestra. And to be able to do that on Luke Cage, it sounds amazing.
Yeah, we were fortunate. Well, one, I want to go back and say that Adrian is a visionary, and he often liken, what I admire about Tip is that push, and Adrian also pushes himself, and pushes other people around to obtain greatness. When, you have that vision to not only compose the music for it, but you're editing. So now the DJ skills actually, because that's what it becomes, the DJ skills of finding the right blends, the right tempos, the right keys of certain things to layer on top of. So these industrial experiences is now opening other doors, for other areas of art and storytelling. And so Adrian is all the way in. And then with Luke Cage, we have a showrunner who is from where we from.
He's us.
He's us.
Yeah.
So it's like when he says to Marvel, look, I needed to like, we understand, you all understand the look of it, but the sound is another character and it has to be spoken this way. And this is why I want these guys in a room because, well, for composing, you can't sample. That's a whole nother legal obstacle for them. So then you have to your composers are people who play, which it's a more narrow for our community. It's a narrow space and we want to broaden it,
right.
And how do we broaden it? By showing like you sample, but you should go play an instrument because if you play an instrument, then you can do this, this, and this.
Right.
And so with working on Luke Cage, I have to shout out Dawn Soler from ABC Music because we said to her in the first meeting, this is going to be great musically, but it won't be as great if we can't get an orchestra. We need an orchestra. And without skipping a beat, she said, you got an orchestra. People might not know how expensive an orchestra is. And she,
a lot of pieces.
A lot of pieces.
People.
Yeah, it's a lot. And for TV too, it's not, for movie. And so you're talking week after week of orchestra sessions. And she made it happen for us. And she understood because she understands the greatness of music and the possibility of it. And again, as you pointed out, having strings and woodwinds and the brass on the records we grew up with means everything. Like if you go back and listen to an Earth, Wind and Fire album, like not only were they lyrically writing greatness, but what made those songs seem so heavenly was the support of that orchestra on top of it. So it's become part of the sound.
Yeah.
For what we do. We have a really good time with composing music.
Yeah.
And we're opening doors, as I said before, because there should be a lot more people that look like us in those spaces.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. Now, talking about the projects y'all been putting together at a frenetic, fantastic pace, these Jazz is Dead series, break down for the people who are watching the concept of Jazz is Dead, because upstairs when we were talking, you talked about how when you would work with some of these artists and you're talking to them about come do this Jazz is Dead thing with us, they're like, I don't want to do that. But then they have the name recognition, right? And so we talked to Masego, and I'm friends with Nicholas Payton, who also pushes the whole idea of Jazz is Dead. So if you could give us the history of why jazz musicians, or whatever so-called jazz musicians, have embraced that phrase.
There's a lot to unpack there. Jazz is Dead is a label / events / media content company that is headed by Andrew Lohero, who is Adrian and I's manager. I say Andrew Lohero, but his nickname is Drew. So Drew is also a concert promoter in Los Angeles, have been for like 17 years. And he had a concert with Keon Harold, trumpet player.
Good dude, too.
Yeah, very just talented musician.
Yeah, amazing horn player.
And great spirit.
Yeah.
And he was having challenges selling tickets. And it frustrated Drew because he's just like, when I book other events with other genres, it goes well. But when it comes to these jazz events, he just has such a hard time. He's like, man, jazz is dead. It was just kind of like crying frustration of just like, what can be done to make this better? And he looks at it and he just says, guys, what if I start something called it Jazz is Dead? And Adrian was like, that's great. And I'm like, that's great. And it went from just that moment to, okay, let's sit down and really talk about this, the prospect of it. And with Adrian's way of recording, everything is all analog, 2-inch tape machines, which is a rarity. The old analog compressors, old EQs, it has a sound. And at the time, everything happens the way it should, I guess.
Right.
And at the time, Adrian had just moved the studio into this new space. And there was an engineer there who also designed some of the equipment, had tested everything there, and he recorded a trio and went straight to 1/4-inch tape. And we're listening back to it going, this sounds like an old Blue Note record, just straight off the tape. And it's just like, it blew our minds. And so then became okay, if we're going to do this Jazz is Dead idea business where we invite the jazz luminaries to perform in a space that is filled with people who really love them. And from a generational aspect, people like us who grew up on hip hop, who discovered jazz because of, the Gang Stars, the Tribe Called Quest, the Pete Rock and CL Smooth, who will have an appreciation for seeing like a Gary Bartz, for an example.
Yeah.
Who might not know all of Gary Bart's records.
Right.
But they familiar enough to know. Fill the room with those people and their parents and their children and give them their roses. And while they're here, if they're willing to go into the studio, because we believe that their voice as artists, as musicians, as people who have given us life, who've birthed us, an opportunity to still shine musically, let's do that. So that's what Jazz is Dead is. And on top of that, we have in-depth conversations like you're doing now with these luminaries, so that there's more you can see from the artists versus just hearing the music, and really them telling the stories of history of things that we're able to take advantage of, but we don't know why.
Right.
We have no idea the sacrifices that they've made to make it easy for us to do some of the things that we just do because we thought it was like this when we arrived. Yeah,
the work you're doing is so very important. Weldon Irvine, who Tribe Called Quest famously repurposed without snitching. I'm just rest in peace to Weldon, because he he came into Nkiru Books when I worked in Nkiru Books, and he introduced himself as Master Well, because I was doing open mics, right? He's like, I got some rhymes. And so it took a couple of times of meeting him to know who he was. And like, oh, this is a jazz icon who's just really trying to tap into what we doing. And then he ended up in the studio with us, and he's playing on Umi Says, and he's playing on the Black Star album, and he's playing on Africa Dream off my debut before his demise. You know, when we listen to Excursions and you got guys had Ron Carter on the album, you guys did We Got the Jazz, and now you're like a legitimate jazz, almost gatekeeper, like a legitimate jazz artist. You have Tony Allen, who worked with Fela and who's now working with y'all. You working with Brian Jackson, who famously worked with Gil Scott-Heron. When I was working at Nkiru Books, we used to listen to a lot of Doug and Gene Carn. This Gene Carn record you did, it's just such a magical record. Y'all working with Roy Ayers after Tribe Called Quest repurposed him as well. I just need to really, really thank y'all for doing this. Someone has to do it. Someone has to do it, and y'all are stepping up. You and Adrian have stepped up and really are documenting the culture in a very, very, very real way.
Thank you. You know, it's really what we do with Jazz Is Dead is, it may seem on a geek level, you know, for those real jazz enthusiasts, right? But and to a certain degree, you know, you might be right if you look at like us doing a record with the Roy Ayers or Marcos Valle. Like, okay, that's some geek level. You guys talk about the way you record the records on 2-inch. You know, okay, it's geeking out. You know, Adrian has a record store filled with, you know, hard to find records and records that also is a roadmap to telling,
right?
To a lot of samples of iconic classic hip hop records from, you know, 90s to the modern. But it's more than that. It is a real love story. You know, like this is, first of all, we're independent. We have no partners. This is all of us pulling together our own personal resources to say thank you to these luminaries who we wouldn't be here if it were not for them. This is a real love story to having a Ronnie Laws, who Black Moon, who was famously, you know, known for sampling, for him to have the challenges and the struggles that a musician has that makes them very hesitant to want to engage, to then, you know, have us knocking on the door saying, hey, just come, we understand why you feel the way you feel, but if you just come on over here, let us open up this door, to being reluctant because of the abuse, to then stand on the stage, to at the end of standing on the stage, while they're on stage, being received in America by a diverse group of people who show nothing but pure love in a way they have never felt their entire lives. Maybe more so in Europe, you know, probably sometimes if you're traveling and performing in some of these other places, that they really appreciate the art and what you're giving, which sometimes in America is just taken for as granted because we have access to it all the time. And then you have that same very artist pretty much break down, say, thank you guys for making me feel life again. That's love. That's what we do it for. So for us, it's we hope that more people will tune into what we're doing in Jazz Is Dead, not for us to sell records, but really
enjoy the vibe,
to say thank you to these luminaries and to let them know that, you know what, with the Gene Carn album, for an example, like, you know, Gene Carn has an incredible musical experiences. I mean, if you talk to her, she'll tell you stories about working with Michael Jackson or like, you know, all the inside kind of things. She's an icon herself, you know, but where she came from and the way her traditional musical education that kind of went through all these cycles inside and outside of jazz to more of a pop mainstream level of R&B, continuing to be that artist, but then to come back around to make the album that we made with her. This album is pretty incredible.
I agree.
I rarely make statements like that about my work.
Right.
I'm just like, if you love it, thank you so much.
Right.
But this album, and we're proud of all the work that we're doing with Jazz is Dead, again, because these artists, like, they have so much life in them.
Yes, indeed. It reminds me of Ice Cube's Big Three, where he created a league for players who were older, right? But because they're older, they're told to sit down, they're told to not participate. And what it is that they spent their whole life dedicated to. And it's like, why can't they play? Why can't we play in an arena that's more suited to them? And y'all are creating like a Big Three of music.
Could you imagine telling your grandparent to just go sit down?
Yeah, that's right.
Could you, like,
Who's talking to their grandparents like that?
What kind of human being would you be? But that's who we are at times.
In this business, the capitalism of it makes us like that.
It makes us like
aspects of
that.
entertainment.
Not intentionally trying to be disrespectful, but ultimately in the actions and the end results of them.
Yeah.
And that's disrespectful. And again, like, there are things I know for certain that the biggest rap acts would not be capable of had it not been for some of the things that Tribe Called Quest has done behind the scenes. Had it not been for the opportunity that Public Enemy even gave a Tribe Called Quest.
That's correct.
So then now I got to go back to Public Enemy, you know? How could we then, with the blessings we have, not try to do something about it? And that's on all levels. Like, we're doing this here with Jazz is Dead, and it's paying homage to the luminaries first. We're extending it to the younger generation as well.
Hold that thought for a second, because someone grabbed upstairs where we were sitting the records, the vinyl that he gave me. So, because I want to bring that in to show it at the end of the point you're about to make. But I'm sorry. Continue.
Yeah. So it's not only about the luminaries, it's about embracing all of us. You know, at the Jazz is Dead shows, you have someone that's 80 plus, and they're there with their kid, and they're there with their kid. You know, there's 8-year-olds that's up there watching this greatness. Dom Salvador just played recently. I'm watching him going, and I'm looking at the room. I'm like, I hope people understand you don't get this level of class and grace on a stage like this anymore. Like, there are a lot of people doing jazz music, okay, but there's certain people who it's very different. It's a very different experience, and those are the people who we're reaching out to. And then we try to take from our experiences in the music business. We put all this time into the sound. We put all this time into the presentation of the live performances, but we also, with regards to the way they look, it's a lot of love and care that goes into it. You know, to have a Doug Karn who's never been on, out of all that he's done, never have a Downbeat magazine, you know, reach out to him for a cover. It's like, what do you mean? Downbeat is the premier jazz magazine. And because of the work that's happening now and the attention, you know, they're reaching out. So that to us means everything.
Yes, indeed. Well, I mean, thank y'all for doing it. Thank you for taking your time and your energy. I know, Jazz, you had one more question?
Oh, yeah. Finally, what's next?
That's a really great question, Jasmine. One that I always have challenges answering because I don't like to talk about what's next unless...
International man of mystery over here.
I'm not trying to really be mysterious. It's just really, I like to talk about things after they're done. But we have Series 2 of Jazz is Dead being released now. We worked, as you spoke, we did put out a lot of records. We did a lot of preparation, and even during the pandemic thought, are we doing the wrong thing by launching a label at this time? And we came to the conclusion that music helps and feeds people. And in a time like this, it seems like it would be some nurturing moments. So we released 8 albums.
Music was an MVP.
You graciously gifted me some Jazz is Dead bag right here, and record bag. But there's at least 8 albums in here.
Yeah.
Of what y'all been doing. You're jealous, right, Jazz?
You actually have 7 albums because you're giving me one of them. So
right.
I feel like, because we also put everything on vinyl, and vinyl is really important. And I grabbed what I could because there's certain titles that we might not have in vinyl. But Series 2 is coming out now, and that's featuring Tony Allen, featuring Lonnie Liston Smith, featuring Henry Franklin. Oh my God!
Wow.
Who was also part of he was an artist on the Black Jazz label back in the 60s and 70s. The Adrian Young album also came out.
The American Negro.
The American Negro.
That's such a powerful art on
Indeed.
the cover.
Y'all can't see it all, but some of it is for me.
Tony Allen, Gene Carn, and then so we're working on Series 3 right now with some more luminary, legendary artists. We work with artists from Brazil. We have the Brazilian jazz connection is very strong and tied to, like, again, I keep mentioning Earth, Wind & Fire because they made such an impact on me. But even with them, if you go to the All in All album, Brazilian Rhyme.
I mean, look, Mr. Muhammad is Earth, Wind & Fire doing Brazilian style jazz.
Exactly. And so the music is, I mean, jazz music.
Cal Jader as well. That all that stuff is so influential.
So the way we feel about jazz, they themselves as Brazilians feel the same way, and they're are pop musicians, but then musicians who are like, yo, there's the depths and layers and what's coming from this, African-American experience.
And there's more black people in Brazil than there are in America.
So, I know, because as I said, people think I'm Brazilian all the time.
So for us, it's important for us to have that marriage. And so we working with Brazilian artists and in the Series 3, which that's like 2023, 2024. So it's so far of the what's next part of the conversation.
Right around the corner, brother.
Yeah, 2023 is tomorrow.
That's right around the corner.
It is, but we have releases for Series 2 that also is part of 2023. Adrian and I are working on, if you guys have Stars Network, Season 2 of Raising Canaan. We did.
Yay! My friend's on that show. Shout out London Brown.
Yeah, Raising Canaan fans. This is a Raising Canaan family.
I mean, it's a power universe out over here.
I haven't seen it yet.
You would love it.
I'm sure.
So we did the music for Season 1 and Season 2. Oh man, so all I could do is just. It's a really incredible season.
Well, that's beautiful.
There's a new show on Hulu called Reasonable Doubt. Mm-hmm. The showrunner is Ramla Muhammad, who was part of the Shonda Rhimes world of Shondaland television. So that will be out this fall. We did the score to the Rick James, what's it called? Bitchin'.
Rick James, bitch.
It was called Bitchin'. What was it called?
Sausage Jenkins movie.
Yeah, Sausage Jenkins movie.
Okay.
We did the music for that. That came out earlier this year. We worked on Season 1 and Season 2 of The Equalizer. Not sure what's going to happen.
Shout out to Latifah.
Yeah, shout out to Latifah for the
show's
call.
doing well, right?
Yes. Adrian is working on All Rise as well, which is on Oprah Winfrey Network. Mm-hmm. And we have some more shows lined up.
So we should have
shows.
said, what are you not working on?
What am I working on? Well, let's see. Working on everything. Have you seen television?
And I'm here kicking it with the People's Party. You know what I'm saying?
So, and the People's Party is honored to have such a prolific, iconic guest as Ali Shaheed Muhammad.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for the invite. It's been a heck of a career. Mm-hmm. I stay very busy because I don't know how to keep still.
This is what you do.
And I feel
You're
that
being very gracious with your gifts.
Well,
you've been given.
I don't know. I don't know because when I look around and I see that our people are still struggling, and I'm more of a behind the scenes person, and the things that the music allows for me to do, and so I always felt like, man, I'm not doing enough. There's so much more
I mean, you dropped 8 albums in one
During
year.
COVID.
Yeah, that
I'm not doing enough.
Well, I say that because, again, if we look at what the Supreme Court just did to the country, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? And there's so much. So that's why I feel like
I understand what you're saying.
This, like,
as men in general, we need to be speaking up a lot more about these things.
There's a lot more that needs to be done. There are people who are. I just learned about something called 115, where there's a gentleman who was locked up, and there's a mandatory for certain prisons. If you don't do a command that an officer says, they can mandatorily add more time without any representation to that. And so, hearing about that happening right now in 2022 is indentured servitude.
That's right.
Right? And so for whatever technicalities of how a person landed in this situation and whatever you want to place on it, but this is happening on our watch right here, right now. Right. And people don't know about it. So there's just a lot of work to do, bro. And so I am thankful that you guys asked me to come to have a conversation with you. I just have my sleeve rolled up, and I hope that the music, cool. It helps maybe to figure out some next plan. It could be the backdrop of someone who's planning it.
Yeah.
Right.
It's our job as entertainers to provide voice and platform for the people who are out there doing that work.
Yeah. But I also want to make sure that we're doing some work.
No doubt.
So thank you guys.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Ali Shaheed Muhammad.